All right. Remember, analytic means given the equation. So we're going to be given an equation, and it's going to be simple. You're going to switch the x and y values, and then you're going to get y by itself. That's pretty much it. So let's read through this together. We're going to change the f of x to x, just like we have here. And then you're going to change the x to f inverse. We're switching the values. That's all. That step one is very straightforward. Change f of x to x, change x to f inverse. Why? Because the inverse is when you switch the x and the y values, or the function values. So really, step one, there's really no math involved. It's just switching the variables around. And you can write y inverse if you want, or you could just write y. Just make sure at the end you specify that it's the inverse. So if you wanted to just do x here and then y here, that's okay too. Okay, so for step two, isolate means get it by itself. So once you switch the x and y values, you're going to get the f inverse by itself. Now for this particular example, you're going to add 2 to both sides. Okay. And then once you add 2 to both sides, then you will divide by 3. Just like that. And that way you'll have f inverse by itself. Adding 2 to both sides because this is minus 2, so you would add it to both sides.
Okay. I was trying to add it to the 3. That's why I got confused.
Once you divide both sides by 3, these are going to cancel, and that's going to give you your answer. This is your answer. Again, it's not complicated. You're switching 2 variables and you're getting the f inverse by itself. Don't overcomplicate it. Simple. So this equation is the inverse of the original equation, which was 3x minus 2. Original function is 3x minus 2. The inverse function is x plus 2 over 3. If you were to graph them, it would look just like the graph lesson we just did.
So if you were to put that into like your little thingy, whatever that thing is, where you like type in an equation and it gives you an equation. So if you were to type in the first one, it'd be like one thing, and if you were to type in that one, it'd be like this.
Yeah, it'd look like.
Wow, that's really cool. I like this too.
Yeah, that's actually probably what we'll do with the lab. For this one, we have g of x equals x to the 5th minus 3 over 2. Same exact steps. We're going to change the g of x to x. We're going to change the x to the 5th, the x here to g inverse of x. It's still going to be raised to the 5th power, just like it was here. So again, step one, you're just switching the two. That's it. Don't overcomplicate step one. Again, instead of putting x, if you want to put y right here, that's fine. Just make sure you change it at the end to where you stipulated that it's the inverse. So again, step two, we're going to get the inverse by itself, in this case g. So the first step, we're going to multiply both sides by 2 to get it out of the denominator here. So we'll have 2x on the left. And then the next step, to get rid of this 3, we're going to add it to both sides. So once we add 3 to both sides, it'll cancel on the left. And then now, to get rid of this 5, we take the 5th root of both sides. Take the 5th root is the same as raising both sides to the 1/5 power. So if it was to the 4th power, you would raise both sides to the 1/4. But basically what that does is it cancels that exponent out, because 5 times 1/5 is 1, and you're just left with the function itself. Okay? And so that's actually your answer. You'll raise both sides to the reciprocal power, right? So if it was 2/3, you would raise both sides to what? 3 over 2. And it cancels it out, and that will leave your inverse isolated, which is what we were doing with that step. Like this. When you have a fraction and both the top and bottom have, you could say a binomial, 2 terms, it's a lot more steps. But notice that the first step is exactly the same. We're switching x with y, more or less. Okay, so we get x equals 2 f inverse plus 3 over f inverse minus 1. The difference with this one, guys, is this one has 2 x's. So we're going to have 2 f inverses on one side. So the way we're going to start off is realizing that in order to get rid, we have to get the variable out of the denominator. So we're actually going to be multiplying both sides by this denominator to cancel it out. Again, you don't have to write this down. We'll go over it when I give you the assignment. And what that will do is cancel that denominator out. Okay? So you'll have x times f inverse minus 1 on the left, and then 2 f inverse plus 3 on the right. Next thing we're going to do is distribute the x to both terms on the left. So now we'll have x times f inverse minus x times 1, which simplifies to just minus x. So our whole goal again is to get f inverse by itself. We need to have just one of those, and right now we have 2 of them. Okay? And again, if you want to just put y there, it might help you. In other words, you could say x times y minus x equals 2y plus 3. Okay. Next, we're going to add x. We're going to add x to both sides. Okay? You can't see it there, can you? Let's see if I can make this smaller. There we go. So we're going to add those x to both sides. So we'll get x over here on the right. And the next step after that is to get the f inverse expressions on both sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 2 f inverse from both sides. So that way it'll basically cancel here. Okay, so now we have both inverse expressions on the same side of the equation. Does anybody have any idea what to do from here? It starts with the letter F. Opposite of FOIL. Factor. So we're going to pull out a GCF of both terms. F inverse is the GCF. Greatest common factor, right? Well, in a way, he's right. So we're going to pull out an F inverse from both sides. From both expressions on the left. So you'll get F inverse on the outside. What's left is x and 2. So that's what goes on the inside of the parentheses or bracket. And then the final step is divide both sides by x minus 2. If we do that, now we're going to have F inverse by itself. And this is going to be the final answer. And if you want to rearrange this and put the x first, your final answer will be x plus 3 over x minus 2. Listen up. We only got 3 more minutes. Got to get through this. F of x equals 3. Yeah. So if you notice, the difference with this one is when you have a constant number, there's no x, right? There's no x in this equation. It's like y equals 3. It's a straight line across. The only thing we can do is change the f to an x, right? We can't do anything with the 3. So what do you guys think the inverse is?
Make it 3. I don't know. 3 on the other axis.
Okay. Yeah, it would
So
be
instead of 3, 0, maybe it's just not there.
Well, I'll give you the hint. The answer's on the board now.
Yeah, that's fine.
What the inverse is.
No x.
It's a vertical line.
So then it's a horizontal line.
The original is a horizontal line.
So then it's a vertical line.
It's the inverse itself.
This is the
It's
inverse.
inverse.
X equals 3. If you're replacing f with x and that's it, you're done. The inverse is x equals 3. Again, sometimes we take a trivial thing and we make it way harder than it is. The original graph is horizontal. The inverse graph will be vertical. Okay? I didn't hear anybody say x equals 3. That's what I was looking for.
Oh. I just said that this one would be horizontal line.
Right, the new graph will be vertical. That's correct. So this will be your final answer for this one. If your original graph is horizontal, horizontal is going to look like this. Your inverse graph is going to be straight up and down. Remember when you have an equation x equals something? That's a vertical line.